I've been wanting to take a look at a watch from San Martin for a very long time, and with AliExpress's 11/11 sale coming up, I thought now is a perfect time to do it. Today we're going to be taking a look at a very cool watch from San Martin that is perhaps the most obscure homage I've seen yet. So check it out real quick, pause the video, and then comment down below if you think you know what this is an homage of. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave, I live in Japan, and this is a channel all about budget watch collecting. And if you're interested in building a watch collection but don't have a lot of money, one of the best places to go hunting for good values is AliExpress and checking out these watches that you can get direct from China. And if you're looking for wristwatches on AliExpress, there's a pretty wide range of brands, sometimes offering wristwatches with automatic movements for as cheap as $20 and then going all the way up into the $500–600 range, competing in price with a lot of major brands. San Martin has developed a reputation of having some of the best quality watches for the price. They tend to be a little bit more expensive than the kind of, baseline bottom of the barrel stuff, but the quality that they offer seems to be basically on par with what you'd find from most major brands or micro brands, costing usually twice as much. That seems to be the consensus from a lot of other watch reviewers who have reviewed San Martin watches. And after spending a couple weeks with this San Martin, I think that evaluation definitely holds up. Now, this watch was sent to me for free by AliExpress, so I do get to keep the watch after the review is done, which is why you saw the paid promotions flag at the beginning of this video. However, other than the watch itself, I did not receive any compensation from AliExpress, nor did they have any input into the content of this review. So what is this watch an homage of? Well, like I said, it's really obscure. As near as I can tell, this is an homage from an Italian micro brand who did a limited edition collaboration with Hodinkee. And San Martin must have liked what they saw there, because this watch borrows a lot of inspiration from that watch. And that watch is the Unimatic U2 Hodinkee Special Edition. So Unimatic is a brand I was not familiar with at all. I believe they would be considered a micro brand based out of Italy. Their marketing strategy seems to be similar to something like Zelos, where they will announce a batch of watches, they'll do a run of it, and then they'll sell out, and then you have to wait a while for them to do another run. All of their watches have this kind of really cool, clean, minimalist aesthetic. They do dive watches and field watches, and the U2 comes from their field watch line. Now, Unimatic's standard U2 models go for around $425, and the limited edition that they did with Hodinkee with the California dial, which this watch is homaging, that one is now completely sold out. It was retailing for $675, and it's priced significantly above that if you're looking on the used market. And if you're interested in seeing more of the Unimatic original, check out Alex over at Hammond Watch. He got his hands on one and did a review of it, and he also let me borrow some of his footage, so big thanks to him. Check out his channel, he's got some great stuff there. And while it's very clear that San Martin was drawing a lot of inspiration from this Unimatic, it's not exactly a one-to-one copy, but it's pretty close. This is a field watch style design that is on the smaller size. If you look at the numbers, only 38mm case. And yet the case design is very unique, very sleek and minimalist. It has a very flat profile on the wrist with no curvature to the lugs and an oversized crown. So you wind up with a smaller than average watch that has a lot of wrist presence because of the design. So let's go over the specs and dimensions on this watch before we go any further. You're getting a 38mm case with 20mm lugs, 48mm lug to lug, 14mm tall, and that's including a pretty high domed sapphire crystal. You're getting 200 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown, a Seiko NH35 automatic movement, and a very thick nylon strap with great hardware, including a pretty substantial buckle. This watch is normally around $170, but on the 11/11 sale, it's going to be available for around $150, and with coupons and stuff, you might even be able to get it down to around $130. This watch easily feels like it could be priced at $300. And I don't say that about all the AliExpress watches that I've gotten. You can often find some pretty crazy values on AliExpress, but most of the watches that I've gotten, especially in the around $100 price range, they tend to have a lot of compromises where I feel like, yeah, it's a great watch for $100, but there's a lot of stuff that still kind of annoys me about it. This one doesn't really have any of that. From a build quality standpoint, from a finishing standpoint, this watch doesn't appear to have any compromises. The only thing that kind of bugs me about this watch is that San Martin is copying a pretty small company here. Unimatic is something that even people in the affordable realm, they could probably reach for and get. But with that caveat out of the way, I have had a lot of fun with this watch, and there's a lot that I really like about it. So let's go over some of those things. The design of this watch is very unique. It is sleek, it's minimalist, it has a very unusual case shape that's unlike any other field watch or really any other watch that I've reviewed. But because it does have that kind of broad, flat profile, the 48mm lug-to-lug that doesn't curve at all, if you have smaller wrists, that might be a consideration. And even on my wrist, there is a larger than usual gap between the lugs and the bottom of my wrist because it is so flat. You know, typical watch design, they usually design cases to try and conform to your wrist a little bit. This one almost goes the opposite direction. If you look at it from the side profile, the lugs actually slant away from your wrist and not towards it. It's a design element that I feel like it shouldn't work, but it actually really does somehow. The oversized crown and the heavily domed sapphire crystal only add to that. And this sapphire crystal here, I believe, is a single dome sapphire crystal. So you get a lot of distortion on there. It looks really cool at different angles, but that is going to kind of hurt legibility a bit. You get a lot of reflections. I feel like it added a certain amount of charm and vintage feel. But the part of the watch that I probably found myself staring at the most was the dial. I opted for the gray version, and the dial is just a really beautiful gray color. You know, looking closely, you get kind of like a speckled look to it, where it looks like there's little flecks of black dots all over it. And it has a finish that reflects light in a really unique way. Depending on the way the light's hitting it, some parts of the dial will look much darker than the other. It's not a sunburst effect, it's something different. In some lightings, it will fade to almost black, and others it'll be kind of a really faded, muted light gray. And yet in all lighting situations, the printing on the dial completely pops out and is really cool to look at. Printing is very sharp, some of the best I've seen on any watch. It holds up remarkably well, even at macro. On their version, San Martin has gone with this kind of light patina brown color on their markers and hands. Those warm brown numerals and hands kind of soften the look a little bit and add just a little splash of color to what would have been an otherwise very monochrome look. The handset is a very classic sort of pencil style hands that have been divided into two segments with a red tipped lollipop second hand. Now, one thing to note here is that the color on the hands and the markers don't match exactly. And I think that's the only real production shortcut or flaw that I found anywhere on the watch. They paired this watch with a very thick nylon strap that's a double layer nylon strap, put a really substantial, really well finished buckle. In fact, the finishing on the buckle is a lot more interesting than the finishing on the watch. You're getting beveled edges, alternating areas of brushing and polishing, and an engraved logo, which doesn't fit the minimalist style of the watch head itself because the watch itself is very basic on its finishing. The design of the case is very blocky with no bevels, very little curves, and brushed finishing all the way around. And while the brushing is not particularly unique, it is pretty well executed. Overall, the watch has a very masculine, tough kind of look to it, again, with a build quality that feels incredibly solid. You combine that with the 200 meters of water resistance and the sapphire crystal, and you have the makings of a very tough field watch for 150 bucks. The lume on this watch is good. You know, I think if they wanted to give up that sort of brown patina look on the dial, they could have brightened it up and gone with straight C3 or BGW9. But I think going with those brown tones was a good trade-off. And while the lume isn't anything spectacular, it does look nice, it's functional, it'll give you a good amount of after dark usage. One final thing to note about this watch is that it features the Seiko NH35 movement, and if you looked at this, you notice that this is a no-date dial watch. So there's a ghost date position here. That means that when you're setting the watch, you have to be a little bit careful to make sure you pull the crown all the way out because there is a position on the crown for setting the date, which is useless because the dial on this watch doesn't have a window to show that date. The only reason to do that is to save a little bit of money, but it's a fairly common practice. At the sort of $150 to $170 price range that this watch is currently going for, I feel like this is an outstanding value for the money, and it's one that I had a lot of fun wearing. But as always, I'd love to hear what you guys think of this, particularly if any of you guys have any experience with Unimatic, because again, that was a brand that I was completely unfamiliar with before seeing this watch. And I'd also be curious to hear what you guys think about the idea of homaging or copying watches from really small brands like this rather than just big companies like Rolex and Omega. And if you'd like to support the channel, make sure you check out the t-shirt store. You can get this Scuba Dude hoodie or t-shirt, and occasionally I try and sell some JDM watches, so you can check and see if I got anything listed there as well. And if you want to hear more about my thoughts on these AliExpress homages, I just did a video about that, so check that out over there. This watch from San Martin sort of exceeded my expectations from that previous video, but that's going to wrap up for today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.